Why NATO exists, and who really runs it. The misunderstanding. NATO is often described as a defensive alliance. That description is true, but incomplete. Because NATO is not just a military pact. It is a power coordination system. It doesn't exist because countries like cooperation. It exists because history proved something uncomfortable. No European power could secure itself alone, and global power had shifted permanently. To understand NATO, you don't start with modern wars. You start with fear. 1. Why NATO was created. NATO was formed in 1949, just 4 years after World War II ended. Europe was devastated. Cities were destroyed. Economies were broken. And most importantly, power vacuums had formed. One force emerged stronger than ever: the Soviet Union. Western Europe feared two things at the same time: a return of German militarism, expansion of Soviet influence. NATO solved both problems with one structure: collective defense. American leadership anchored in Europe. The logic was simple: an attack on one would be treated as an attack on all. That principle became Article 5, the heart of NATO. 2. NATO is not a country, it's a commitment. This is where many people misunderstand NATO. NATO has no standing army, no independent war economy, no permanent combat forces. What it has instead is something more powerful: a binding agreement that synchronizes militaries, intelligence, logistics, and command structures. When NATO moves, it moves because member states activate it, not because NATO decides on its own. But here's the key question: if everyone is equal, why does NATO move the way it does? 3. Who really runs NATO? Officially, NATO decisions require consensus. Every member gets a vote. No vote means no action. But power is not just about voting. Power is about who provides the most troops, who provides the most money, who provides the intelligence, who controls the logistics. And in all four categories, one country dominates: the United States. The US contributes the largest military capability, the majority of strategic airlift, the backbone of NATO intelligence, the nuclear deterrent umbrella. Without the US, NATO does not function as a global force. So while NATO is multinational, its center of gravity is American. 4. NATO's structure reveals its reality. Look at NATO's command system. The Supreme Allied Commander Europe, NATO's top military officer, has always been an American general. Not by coincidence, by design. Why? Because NATO was built on a reality. Only the United States had the global reach to move armies, supplies, and air power across continents. This wasn't dominance for ego. It was dominance for capability. Europe accepted US leadership because no alternative existed. 5. What NATO is really for. NATO's purpose is often described as defense. But its deeper function is deterrence through unity. NATO doesn't exist to fight wars. It exists to make wars too costly to start. The idea is psychological. If aggression guarantees overwhelming retaliation, aggression becomes irrational. This is why NATO expansion matters so much. Not because of territory, but because of commitment lines. Once a country joins NATO, conflict involving it becomes global by default. 6. NATO after the Cold War. Why IT didn't disappear. Many expected NATO to dissolve after the Soviet Union collapsed. It didn't. Because NATO was no longer just about one enemy. It had become an institution of alignment. It standardized military training, weapons compatibility, intelligence sharing, strategic planning. NATO evolved from a Cold War alliance into a security architecture. Dismantling it would have meant dismantling decades of integration. 7. Does NATO serve Europe or America? This is the most controversial question. The answer is uncomfortable because it's both. NATO serves European security by preventing internal arms races, providing nuclear deterrence, coordinating defense planning. NATO serves American interests by anchoring US power in Europe, preventing hostile dominance of the continent, maintaining global strategic reach. This is not exploitation. It is alignment of interests, unequal but mutual. 8. Who controls NATO's future? NATO's future depends on three things: US commitment, European military investment, perceived external threats. If American engagement declines, NATO weakens. If Europe builds independent military capacity, NATO changes. And if threats increase, NATO expands, not by force but by invitation. NATO does not conquer. Countries ask to join it. That fact alone explains its persistence. The truth about NATO. NATO exists because history taught a brutal lesson. Fragmented power invites catastrophe. It is not perfect. It is not neutral. And it is not equally controlled. But it is intentional. NATO is not run by one country. But it cannot function without one. It is less a democracy of power, and more a system built around reality. The real question isn't whether NATO should exist. The real question is whether the world is becoming stable enough for it not to. And history suggests it isn't. If NATO didn't exist, what would replace it? Chaos or balance? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for fact-driven global documentaries.